it that Primal is so successful without words? Movies as we know them started off as silent films. You see, silent films were silent because they had no synchronized sound for dialogue. On-screen intertitles were used to narrate story points, present key dialogue, and sometimes even comment on the action for the audience. Subtitles kind of do the same thing that silent movies did back then. Silent films were even said to be silent at the time because there was no soundtrack included on the film print. And although Eugene Laust patented the sound-on film system as early as 1907, the first films with soundtracks did not appear in a few experimental shorts until the early 1920s. It is said that silent films, or rather films with no dialogue per se, had a lot of weight to carry because they had to tell the story without the characters talking, without us understand what they were saying. Aside from cards that would show up in some of the movies to let the audience know what they said, most of these movies had to survive on the embodiment of the rule, show, don't tell. They made more of an impact because you had to pay attention. You see, one of the reasons Primal is so effective and why people love it so much is because there is no dialogue, we don't have a safety net. We can't disengage our eyes and listen with our ears. Our senses are not working at half-mast because we have another sense to rely on. We only have our sight, for the most part, to understand what is going on through the emotive expressions of Fang and Spear. Without them even speaking, you can understand the totality of their entire conversation just based on their body language and their expressions. The art of forcing us to pay attention is what makes Primal so effective. We have no choice but to become totally and singularly attentive to it. And of course, it's not that the sound doesn't matter to us, but because we're so into what's going on, we're forced to look at what's going on. We are visually interlocked with what's going on with the characters in order for us to get where the story is going, get what they're saying, not miss a beat, not miss anything. We are enveloped and enjoy every moment of Primal as our eyes are bathed and caressed by the visually pleasing action, drama, thriller, and poignant scenes that we see take place in the show. You see, when people are talking, our eyes, our ears, and our brain is working to interpret what's going on. Of course, our brain is working a little bit more for us to interpret the words that we hear coming out of someone's mouth. Now, you may think if you're a naturally English speaker that your brain would not be working that hard to translate what somebody is saying in English, but it does. Our brains are always taking in information and interpreting it. Whether you naturally speak English or not, even without dialogue, our brains are still interpreting what we see. It's always trying to make sense of the information it's being fed through our eyes, or through our auditory senses. According to ScienceDaily.com, when our brain is engaging in speech perception, its auditory cortex analyzes complex acoustic patterns to detect words that carry a linguistic message. Our brain is able to do this quite efficiently because, or at least partly, because it can anticipate what it's about to hear. You know how you get the autofill suggestions on Google? Well, your brain kind of does the same thing when it comes to language. In a Maryland study, the researchers mapped and analyzed a participant's neural brain activity while he was listening to a single talker telling a story, and it showed that the brain quickly recognized the phonetic sounds that made up syllables and transitions from processing merely acoustic to linguistic information in a highly specialized and automated way. The brain has to keep up with people speaking at a rate about 3 words per second, and it achieves this in part by distinguishing speech from other kinds of sound in about 1/10 of a second after the sound enters the ears. When people in the study were instructed to listen to one person talking and to concentrate on what they were saying when there were multiple people talking, people could do that effectively for the most part, but they would not catch what the other person was saying, and it was hard to really concentrate on the activity going on around them when trying so hard to be attentive to what one person was saying. The researcher says, "We think lexical perception works by our brain considering the match between the incoming speech signal and many different words at the same time." In layman's terms, it was basically saying that we have a limitation on how much information we can receive at any one time, especially when there's multiple things going on. Although our brains can do this quite effectively, and you can learn this through practice, it does cause the brain to work harder. With films lacking dialogue like Primal, we are forced to just follow what our eyes are saying. And yes, I said saying, because our eyes are telling telling us what is going on. It's much harder to misinterpret what you're seeing right in front of you than what you're hearing. How many times have you watched a movie and your brain is like, wait, what did that person say? And then you might process it later or just throw it to the wayside because it's probably not that important. You're too busy paying attention to what's directly on the screen. But in Primal, there's no room for misinformation. You are being told a story and being shown what the creator wants you to see. You can sit back and just let the story tell itself. The thing is, we don't recognize how on vacation our brain feels when we're watching something that doesn't require us to actually listen. I mean, we have to still listen, but it's not the primary source of intaking information for us. You see, even though humans have 5 senses, our eyes to see, the taste, smelling, hearing, and skin for touch, the most important organs or sensory organs are our eyes. We perceive up to 80% of all impressions by means of our sight. Now, it is true that if one sense stops working, the others may feel more acute. It's not that you have super hearing all of a sudden because you can't see. It's just that now you're forced to rely on your ears, something that you always had, but you didn't really depend on because your sight was always more important. It was the strongest of your organs or the strongest of your senses. However, if something were to happen to the other senses, the eyes, being able to see, would help you survive so much better than your other senses if you were to lose them. If you can't smell that something is rotten, your eyes are actually able to identify certain tastes and spoilage of food. There are times, but I know you guys, I've said it in the past, but I've had allergy problems with my nose due to elongated use of those stupid nasal sprays, and for a while I couldn't smell anything. I don't even think I have my full sense of smell, and I'm really paranoid when it comes to certain foods and stuff, so I would always look at my food. I mean, really inspect my food before eating it. I have OCD in that regard. I could readily identify when food didn't look too kosher. As I moved it around, if it was too slimy, if it was crumbling in the wrong place, I'd be like, even though this has been here only 2 days, it doesn't look too right. And there was a time when I didn't realize that the fridge was malfunctioning, and the foods that were supposed to last for like 4 days actually spoil the next day because of it, and I was able to pick that up through my sight. In the wild, if we can't hear very well, because humans don't have that great sense of hearing, we depend on our eyesight to see if a tiger's gonna jump out of a bush, to see if the bushes are moving weirdly, to also watch birds, and to take cues from the environment that there's a stalker nearby. It's why humans are diurnal creatures and usually go out and are more active during the daytime, because they can't see shit at night and they can't readily identify where sounds are coming from, even if they were just using their ears. All of that being said, Jenny Tartakovsky made the right decision in not even including any subtitles for what was going on in Primal. We could have a story told to us using the medium that we're best able to interpret, visuals. The other reason this works is because no matter what language you speak, whether there's a language barrier or not, there is none when you don't have to rely on English or any other language that people from across the world may not be able to understand. Anybody can watch Primal and understand exactly what is going on, because expression and visuals is a universal human language that we all can understand. If you go to another country and you don't speak the language and you're holding your crotch and jumping around, people will be able to understand quite easily that you have to go to the bathroom. If tears are falling down your face and you're really sad and you look like this, people from any country can understand exactly what is happening because it's a universal thing that humans identify, expression and emotions. That's why Primal is so successful as a show. It brings people together and you don't need to understand any language. All you need to understand is humanity. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.